الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه أستعين وصلي وسلم على خاتم نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحابته الميامين وعلى كل من اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته واقتفى أثره إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this gathering. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward you all for participating and coming out tonight. Thank you so much for showing up. May Allah reward you all. As you all know, we have gathered here tonight for a noble cause, to support one another. I would have said you guys were talking, that's why it's not clear. But Bismillah. Sheikh Patrick, you're the... I think we just need to turn off. Bismillah. So we have gathered here for a noble cause, to show support, to show love, to express our concern to those that are less fortunate. The Prophet ﷺ says in authentic hadith, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ. A beautiful way and a very simple way of clarifying and explaining the best of people. That the best among us are those that are good towards other people. If you really want to look at yourself and how good you are and how high you are in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and which level you stand in the sight of Allah, look at your actions in dealing with other people. This is truly what identifies you as a Muslim, what identifies you as a human being. خَيْرُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in many of his lectures and many of his teachings, when he would advise people that might underestimate certain acts of worship, they might, belittle certain acts where this is too simple, and the reward is massive, the reward is great. The Prophet ﷺ said, وَتَبَسُّمُكَ فِي وَجْهِ أَخِيكَ صَدَقَةً. Even to smile on the face of an individual is considered as charity. So never belittle, any actions, anything that you can do. Anything that you can take away from this gathering is something that is precious, something that is valuable. Any words of wisdom that you can hear, or anything that is practical, or anything that you can participate in, bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is a lot of ajr. And there's many hadith where those individuals belittled people that were giving, a minimal amount of charity. It was very simple and very small. And the Prophet ﷺ said, اتَّقُوا النَّارَ وَلَوْ بِشَقِّ تَمْرَةٍ. Even if you donate a half a date in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is something that is great. And there's many ahadith that encourage us of giving other people. A few ayat, and inshallah we will give it to our dear sisters. This shows you how our sisters are working. We have no brothers up here today. Again, that's a sign that we're not doing enough. There are people that are leading this effort, so may Allah reward you all. Truly blessed to have you. Subhanallah, in the time where the Prophet ﷺ was going through emotional stress, and in this time he was facing major difficulties and trials more than any time before. And he was facing the departure of his wife, his uncle, the abusive relationship he had with the people of Quraysh and how aggressive they were and oppressive they were, with all the difficulties that any human and any person could even imagine or go through. Every stress that you could think of, or any stress that you have dealt with or will deal with, is something that he went through, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was going through these difficult times, and here comes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he guides the Prophet and he navigates the Prophet through these struggles. And this is something that we need to look at, because this is in Quran. This is no historical event in a few stories. This is in Quran, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was going through trials and difficulty. Allah addresses it very clear in Quran. How does he teach the Prophet ﷺ to overcome this challenge? This is a training session. Quran is a book that trains human beings, that make us better people. How did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala train the Prophet ﷺ in overcoming this challenge, in overcoming this time of difficulty, in overcoming the stress? He says, مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never left you alone, that you are not here by yourself. And this shows you the importance of supporting one another, not criticizing one another. When someone is trying to do something good or is running to do something good, our first policy is be supportive. Be supportive. Why do you have that person? Why are you doing it to that person? Why is this person Arab? Why is that person a non-Arab? Why? We break people down with a few things that we say. We could truly demolish, as that wise person said, you could kill with one word. We really have to be considerate. That as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed love towards the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have to show love and show support to these individuals that are doing good. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds him of the reward. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى. That indeed, al-qiyamah, al-akhirah, the second life is much greater and has much more joy than the first life. What do we hear from this? That in the presentation today, you have to know that there are certain things that might be difficult for certain families. You know, a lot of people that think that people that foster care are just smiling all day, this is a challenge. This is a new child being brought into the house. You know, again, this child has to adopt, has to come into the house, get to know the family. This person comes in with a lot of challenges also. This child could be coming from abusive parents, and now he's coming in or she's coming into your house. So to understand the reason why you're doing this is what makes you overcome every challenge. That I'm doing it for Allah, and I'm willing to fight my way through in presenting a human being to society. A person that is righteous, a person that is carries himself or herself in the best way. So again, doing it, this is not my lecture, so I have to really present it. And then in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ends the rest of the surah of service. So the greatest way to give back to Allah and the greatest way to overcome certain challenges is through your fi'l al-khair, your goodness and righteousness. Wallahi, what's going to preserve us in life, even when you're driving and you fall asleep and there's a car that's about to just hit your car or smack you on the side, and here comes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and He protects you from certain things that you have no control of. This is the fi'l al-khair, this is the goodness that you have done in an event which you never considered or thought of to be, precious or valued, something that was very simple and minimal. But in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it was truly great. So inshallah, the best way to give back is to listen and to see how to serve our communities, to overcome our ethnic barriers, to not just look at how do we participate with the Syrian refugees, how do we deal with foster care in general, regardless, before the refugees come in, how to overcome the ethnic barrier where I'm willing to foster care anyone that is in need. When the Prophet said, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ, he didn't say, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلْعَرَبِ. The best among you are the best to Arabs, to non-Arabs. He said, nas. And what does nas mean? Muslims, non-Muslims, could be atheists, Christians, Jews, anyone that lives on the face of this earth is considered nas. And these are people that we are responsible to support and to show love. Barakallahu feekum. The battery died lunch.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you, Imam Masnari. Tonight's session is an informational session on fostering domestic and refugee children. So we are so fortunate to have an amazing panel of women that can speak to fostering domestic, refugee, and just about the fostering process in general. So I am so honored to be able to introduce these four wonderful sisters. First, we are going to hear from Muna Yusuf, who received her bachelor's and law degree from the University of Michigan. Currently, she works as a referee in the Wayne County Juvenile Court. She presides over child abuse, neglect, and juvenile delinquency cases. And she has a husband and 4 beautiful children. Keep her also very busy.
Assalamu alaikum. So my name is Muna Yusuf, and as Sister Fawzia mentioned, I work in the juvenile court in Wayne County. And so I have approximately, it ranges anywhere from 300 to 400 cases at any given time. Half of those cases are child abuse and neglect cases. I've been working as a referee for 5 years, and before that I had experience as an assistant attorney general where I represented the state of Michigan Department of Health and Human Services in these foster care cases. So I want to give you some background by way of numbers. Across the nation, we have approximately 400,000 children in foster care. About 1/4 of those, about 100,000, are eligible for adoption. In the state of Michigan, we have about 13,000 children in foster care. And again, approximately 1/4 of those, maybe a little bit more, are eligible for adoption. The heaviest concentration of these foster children in the state of Michigan is right here in southeast Michigan. I know the numbers in Wayne County. In Wayne County, we have approximately 3,000 children in foster care. I'll talk about the Muslim numbers at the end. Why do children come into foster care? Let me emphasize to you that the purpose of foster care is to protect children. It's not to destroy families. In fact, second to the protection of children, the foster care system tries to preserve families. Some of the common factors that lead a child to enter into foster care is when a parent or legal guardian or other person that's responsible for the care of a child fails to do so, or subjects the child or fails to protect the child from physical abuse or any other type of harm. Again, those common factors can include, they're not limited to these, and sometimes it's a combination of these. It includes substance abuse, it's a very common one. Unaddressed or out of control mental health problems. Homelessness, poverty, physical abuse, domestic violence, and we can't underestimate the effect of domestic violence on children in the household. Sexual abuse, and sometimes it can be as simple as the death of the parent or guardian who was legally responsible for the child. I know sometimes we think our community, our Muslim community, doesn't have these problems, but I can attest to you, I have seen each and every one of these in Muslim families. So we are not immune to any of those problems. We have them, and we have Muslim children who are in foster care domestically from the United States. Children can come into foster care any time from being a newborn, and we have plenty of kids that go directly from a hospital straight to a foster home. They can enter foster care anytime up to age 18, and once in foster care, they can stay until age 21. Again, there's no particular ethnicity, race, religion that defines a foster child. They can come from any background, any socioeconomic status. One common thread that I see in almost all foster children is that there is some level of trauma that they've experienced. Some much more than others. But even if you can imagine, no matter how horrible your family is, being taken away from everything that you know and being put into a brand new environment, that by itself is traumatic. And it doesn't matter how old you are, unless maybe the newborns, but there's trauma. Even when a baby is taken from their home environment and put into another home, there is that trauma. And some of these children endure years and years of trauma before they come into foster care. No one chooses to be in foster care, and if we look back at ourselves and you think about the household that you grew up in, maybe it was wonderful, maybe it had problems, but none of us chooses which parent we're born into. And if you were fortunate to have been raised in a home with one or more stable, nurturing adult, then Allah has blessed you. And I think we can all agree every child deserves a loving and stable home environment. I want to let you know that I know in different countries, children without parents are taken care of in orphanages. We don't have orphanages in the United States. We don't use orphanages. In fact, when a child is removed from their family, the goal is to place them in what we call the most family-like setting. The goal is to get them in as close a culturally, religious, ethnically, custom-based family as the family that they came from. It's not always possible, but that's the goal. And so we rely on foster homes as the primary source of taking care of these children. And if you think about your own children, if my children had to be removed from me, where would you want them placed? Would you want them in an institution, or would you want them in a family that loved them and treated them as their own? That's an easy question. All right, so what makes a good foster parent? There are not very many requirements to be a foster parent. You do have to be an adult. You don't have to be married. You don't have to own a home. You can rent a home. You can live in a house. You can live in an apartment. Doesn't matter what your educational background is. It doesn't matter if you have experience. It doesn't matter if you have children or you don't have children. It doesn't matter if you're employed or not. However, you do have to be financially stable. What makes an excellent foster parent is someone who has the ability to love a child, someone who has the ability to show love for that child, someone who has the ability to nurture. You have to be patient. You have to have some flexibility. You have to provide structure and support, but not be rigid. You have to have the ability to work with others and not get frustrated by all the bureaucracy involved.
Can the brothers come closer so we can take the chairs towards the sister side? Please, the brothers in the back, there's a lot of empty chairs. We want to take the chairs to the other side.
So I wanted to share with you some of the experiences that I have, and I see all different kinds of foster families. Some of them, they do it, they house a child, they feed a child. It doesn't cost you anything to be a foster parent. In fact, the state gives you a very small stipend to meet the needs of the child, and some people kind of do it as this is their thing, I foster parent. The most amazing foster parents that we have are the ones who do it, in my opinion, out of a sense of obligation towards these children, or a sense of obligation to their Lord. There's a lot of faith-based foster parents that I think do a wonderful job. And unfortunately, very few of them are Muslim. I can count them on my hand. Foster parenting is harder than parenting. And I always tell people the hardest job in the world is being a parent, because it tests you in so many ways. There's no book you can read, there's no training you can get that can by itself make you a good parent. Now think about how difficult it is to raise your own child, and now think about how difficult it would be to raise another child who you didn't have the bond with since they were born, who has come from some type of a traumatic background. It's hard, it's very, very hard, but that doesn't mean that we don't do it. This is an issue that we can't throw money at and fix. I know a lot of people are very generous with their money. They're willing to give money to any kind of cause, children in need, let's donate to it. Unfortunately, this is a problem we can't fix with money. It takes something much, much more valuable than money. It takes our energy. It takes our effort. It takes our willingness to compromise our comfort. It requires us to overcome our frustration and to persevere. Why us? Why should we become foster parents? I'm going to let Imam Masmari touch on this issue, but I do believe it is our religious obligation to take care of children who are in need. And I think most of you can agree with that, if not all of you. I've had many cases where, not many, but I've had several cases where I have a Muslim family in front of me and their children have been removed for the reasons I mentioned previously. It eases the tension in that case when a parent knows that their child is in a Muslim home. And I've had parents who are so high when they come to court. Can't even keep her head up, keeps falling down, but she would say things like, just please don't feed him pork. So no matter what her problem was, she still had that love for her child and still wanted that child to be in a Muslim home. In another case, alhamdulillah, we were able to find, there's a wonderful Muslim foster parent, I think in this community or in the Troy area. She took in a bunch of little kids from a Muslim family, and it eased and it helped the reunification process. Alhamdulillah, those kids are back with their parents, that case is closed, but it provided the family with ease, and it provided those children with a very similar home. Children, all of us, have a sense that we need to belong somewhere. So when a family opens up and accepts them, they belong. And if our Muslim community doesn't do it, then I'm telling you there are other people who are, and will, number one, lose our Muslim children. Number two, we'll lose out on the other opportunities to accept children into our community. I'll let some other people get into the specifics of, once you become foster parent, you're not obliged to take any child. You can specify, I'll only take female, I'll only take teenagers, I'll only take babies. Sometimes the placement is temporary, sometimes it can be permanent. A lot of times it's up to you whether or not you want it to be permanent. All right, so by way of numbers, I told you I would get to it. As far as Muslim families go, I don't know the exact number right now, but I know that over the past few years, it's fluctuated in Southeast Michigan between 50 to 75 children that we know of that are Muslim in domestic foster care. So when you're thinking about whether or not you want to become a foster parent, whether it's for a refugee child or for a Muslim domestic child or for a non-Muslim domestic child, I want you to think about not who am I to become a foster parent, because I know we're all busy and we all have a lot of obligations, but you should ask yourself, who am I not to?
Thank you, Mona. That was very, very informative, and I feel like I've opened up emails in the last several years where Mona has said there's 4 kids, there's 5 Muslim kids, these need Muslim kids that need a home, they're in foster care, so they exist, they have existed, and the system really needs support. They need all of you. Fortunately, the system, Samina has had Samina Zahur is a physician in the Canton area. She's a mother of 3 children, and she and her husband Imran became licensed as a foster parent in 2012, and they fostered a young Muslim boy for 2.5 years, and she's going to share with us her story. Thank you.
So, as Fadil said, my husband and I became licensed foster parents about 3 years ago. Actually, after listening to Sheikh Ali, our Imam at the masjid, tell us about how many Muslim kids were in the foster system and how few Muslim families were out there to take care of them. So my husband and I, both working, 3 kids of our own, we just felt compelled. He gave a very compelling speech, and as busy as we were, we thought, somebody has to do this. And there were several families that stepped up, alhamdulillah, and we were one of them. And it took us about 6 months to get licensed, and after that, the phone calls started coming in. Teenagers sexually abused, children physically abused, children in the hospital, can't go home because they don't know where their parents are. You know, parents passed away and no next of kin to take care of them. And it was heartbreaking because, you know, I had in my mind what I was able to do, and with 3 boys of my own, I had thought, you know, I need to have a younger child, a boy, and it was heartbreaking to say no to them. But after several phone calls, we finally got a call about a young boy who was 6 years old, who was literally sitting in the foster agency's home, foster agency's facility office, and they were literally just calling families, one after the other, who can take this child, who can take this child. They gave me 1 hour to make a decision on whether or not I could take this child, otherwise I have to move on to the next family. And I did a sahara, and I talked to my husband, and we decided, you know, this was as best of a fit as any for us, and we told them yes. And 2 hours later, Rashid came to my home with just the clothes on his back and his backpack from school. And the caseworker came in, had me sign some forms, and then said, okay, Rashid, you know, I'm leaving, and then he was with us. And he sat quietly, he wouldn't eat. Finally, you know, he started warming up to my kids a little bit, and he said he was tired, and he wouldn't sleep in the bed. He refused to sleep in the bed. We made a little tent for him in the room, and he went in his tent and he started crying. And he cried for 2 hours straight. And he just said, I just want my mom. Can you just have me call my mom? So I called the caseworker who was on my case, and she said, you know, we don't know where the mom is. I mean, we don't know where the father is. So anyway, he finally basically cried himself to sleep. And this kind of continued for the next week. You know, he would just have periods where he would go in his little tent, and he would cry, and then he would feel a bit better, and he would come out, and he would start eating with us eventually. And then I had to take him to school, and we had to enroll him in the school that was close to us. And when I took him in, he didn't even meet the kindergarten grade level. He only knew 12 letters. He was 6 years old. He should have been in kindergarten. They said he didn't even meet the preschool level of education. They thought maybe he had a learning disability. Anyway, because of his age and because of his situation, the Islamic school that my boys went to, alhamdulillah, they took him in, and slowly he opened up. And when he first came, he came to us in February. He came actually in the middle of kindergarten, and he was so behind. But alhamdulillah, by Allah's grace and the help of people, he made up that gap within 3 months. And not by anything I did, just people around me just came in to help. When he first came, although he was potty trained, he regressed. He started wetting himself. He would have some tantrums. He would, you know, he would say some swear words. And sometimes I get calls from the school about his behavior. And of course, you know, I was concerned about my own children, and we'd have to have very difficult conversations with my children about his background and why he was using the language that he was using. And alhamdulillah, you know, my boys really stepped up, and I think they really saw this as something that they learned from. And you know, I have to say, as Mona said, when a child comes into your home, it's a trauma for them. But it's not just a trauma for them, it's also a big adjustment for the family that he comes into. And I have 3 boys, 2 were 14 at the time, 1 was 10 at the time. And the first question they asked me after he came home was, are they going to take us away too? Can somebody come and take us away? And the truth is that, you know, situations like this can happen to any child. And alhamdulillah, we think we're in a bubble and we're protected, but you know, situations can always happen. And so again, having my children, trying to reassure them was also one of the things that I had to do when Rashid came into the home. Now, as working parents, you know, as with children of our own, there was a lot that we had to do outside of just taking care of him. Because of the adjustment that he had, we'd have to take him for, you know, counseling every 2 weeks. We'd have to have parent-teacher meetings with the school because he was behind. My husband had to take him once a week to the agency so he could meet his parents. And it actually took about a month for them to find his parents. So for up to a month, we didn't even know what his parents looked like. And as Mona said, when we went, as difficult as it was, he was holding on. He didn't want to let go of his mother. He said, "I will do anything, but please take me back with you." And it was heart-wrenching. And his mother, the one thing she told him was that you're in a good Muslim home. And that was the only thing that reassured her. And even though there were a lot of issues with his parents and their parents were not together, every time any of them had an opportunity to talk to us, they would thank us and say, "I'm just glad he's in a Muslim home. I'm just happy he's in a Muslim home." Sometimes things that we think children should enjoy or be normal with, some of these kids, when they come from traumatic backgrounds, they deal with it very differently. We had, in the very beginning when she came, we thought, okay, let's change his clothes. No, I don't want to change my clothes. So it was the only clothes that he had from his parents. We brought him new clothes. He didn't want to wear his new clothes. He just wanted us to wash his old clothes and have him wear that. When we took him to take a shower, he would start screaming. He started screaming, "Don't burn me, don't burn me, please don't burn me." Because his parents had told him that if he wasn't good, he was going to go to a bad family and the family was going to burn him. And so we had to slowly, with a bucket of water, take water up and very slowly have him touch the water each time to make sure. And he literally took not showers. He didn't take a shower for at least 6 months. He literally took a bucket of water, bathing with lukewarm water because he was always afraid the water was burning. And I think a year later, we all made a trip to Disney, and we were all talking about the fireworks, and everybody was excited. And in the evening, the fireworks came, and all of a sudden he started screaming and crying. And he wouldn't stop until the fireworks were over, and then he finally told us that it sounded like gunshots to him. So when we say, and it was difficult for us because we had never had a foster child before. And so things that we would normally expect from our own children, it was very difficult to expect from him. And things that we thought that would work with disciplining our children wouldn't always work with him. And things that we thought would bring us closer to our children didn't always work with him. And you have to understand, these children are not happy that they're in your home. They're not going to be thanking you. They're not going to be saying, "Oh, we're so happy we're away from our parents." They just want to go back to their parents. And every week he would go and he would come back upset and sad. And towards the end, when he knew that he wasn't going to be going back to his parents, he was very sad. Even though he'd been with us for 2 years, he was very sad that he wasn't going to see his parents anymore. And the last day that he was with his parents was heart-wrenching. I mean, I didn't go. My husband went. I don't think I could have handled it. But literally, his parents were grabbing onto him, and security had to take them away. I mean, these are not situations where parents are just leaving these kids. These are difficult situations, difficult decisions to remove these kids from their families. So, in the last few moments, I just wanted to say, I know that a lot of you came because of what's going on in Syria and refugees coming, and the news that there'll be a lot of children coming and there'll be needs for families for them. And I just wanted to put a plug out. Actually, Rania had set this up even several months ago before we even heard about the refugee children coming. She had set this up originally as a domestic foster informational setting. And the opportunity came up that there's also a need for refugee children, and there was more of an interest. But I want you to understand that children that are here in our own backyard have gone through their own wars. They have been separated from their own families. They have trauma that may be equal to what these Syrian refugees are coming from. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but just in their own way. And as Mona said, no matter how difficult a home may be, it's your home. And to come into a foreign home, to come into a home that doesn't understand your culture, doesn't understand your faith, that's wrong. That's a travesty for our community, that we have Muslim children in non-Muslim homes. It's a travesty that we have non-Muslim children not in Muslim homes. This is a responsibility for all of us. And I want to thank Rania for inviting me here. I want to thank you for listening. And I hope that you won't just take this as a session to just come and attend, but take this as an initiative to actually, inshallah, do something on it.
Thank you, Samina. I've heard this story before, and I still can't sit through it with a dry eye. And I will say that I saw Rashid not too long ago, and what Samina will not say and give herself credit for is how much this little boy has blossomed. Alhamdulillah. He really had a wonderful outcome because of Samina, Imran, and her boys. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Thank you, Samina. So, our next speaker really needs no introduction here at Unity Center, but because she does so much for this community, she is on the panel today as a mother of 3 who became licensed for domestic and refugee foster care with her husband, Anas Obeid, through Lutheran Social Services of Michigan. She just welcomed her Muslim refugee foster child into her home this summer. She's a mother of 3, as I mentioned. She's working with Michigan Muslim Community Council and the Syrian American Rescue Network to raise awareness for foster care needs in our local Muslim community. Rania Shabib.
Assalamu alaikum. As was said earlier, initially when I planned this and worked with everybody, this was months ago. This was before we knew that the Syrian refugee children were going to be making their way to Michigan. So I just want to put it out there that we've all been very passionate about this before we knew of this new wave of children coming. As Fazia said, we did, Enes, my husband and I became licensed over the summer. We were licensed by Lutheran Social Services of Michigan as domestic and refugee foster parents. It was something that I had been thinking about for a good year, and I felt completely obligated to do it, and I felt that these children were no different than my children, and they could very easily be my children. And what excuse did I have to not welcome them into my home? And if I don't do it, then who's gonna do it? People have said, well, it's risky. Yes, it is risky. It is risky. You don't know exactly what you're getting into. You don't really know the child coming into your home. And my answer to that is, that's where istikhara and tawakkul really come into play. And after doing a lot of istikhara and a lot of dua, I can't tell you how, said, how easy it became for us. And to me, that was such a sign of, when I would make dua, I would say, Ya Allah, if, we want to do this for your sake, for these children, if this is something that is good for us, then Ya Allah, make it easy for us. And I cannot tell you, there were times when I was thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get my husband Enes to get to the training, right? Because both parents have to attend the training, and I cannot tell you how easy. Lutheran was so great to work with, so great to work with. I feel like I'm really getting to know the entire Lutheran family now. Every day I feel like I'm meeting somebody new. But again, going back to tawakkul, and that's really a test of faith. It's really a test of faith. We're not doing this hopefully for any selfish reasons, but because we need to give back. So yes, we did welcome recently a refugee foster daughter from Somalia. I'm Syrian, she's not. A lot of people have said, why don't you want a Syrian refugee foster daughter? And I said, what difference does it make? I got a call from Lutheran that there's this Muslim girl that needs a home. She had been making dua for a year, every day for a year, in a non-Muslim home. It was a wonderful family, and she's still in contact with them. They're wonderful people, but they were not a Muslim family. Every day, when she first entered the foster care system, she immediately requested a Muslim family. She was told that there weren't any Muslim families that were licensed for refugee foster kids. And every day she continued to make dua for her Muslim family. And I told her, you don't know how much Allah loves you, that your dua was answered. And she said, yes, but it took me a year. I said, yes, but you were patient. You're patient. And keep in mind that there are currently several Muslim refugee children that are right here, and they're not in our homes. They're not Syrian, but they're right here, and they need us. She told me stories of a Muslim boy who's with a non-Muslim family, and they go to church every Sunday. And he doesn't feel comfortable going into the church with them, so he waits for them in the car in the parking lot while they go to church. I'm sure he's with a great family, but again, this is something that he's trying to hold on to his deen. And my question is, how long can they continue to do that for? Without having the family support, without having the Muslim community support. I love the comment that this cannot be solved with money. So many times I've had people come and tell me, let's buy a home or a building and we can make sure that there's people to supervise them. And I think not one of us in this room would do that with our own children. Not one of us. There's nothing to be compared to a loving home. Absolutely nothing. And there's no reason why we shouldn't accept them into our homes. I go off on tangents, I'm sorry. The refugee foster kids in the foster process is a little bit different than domestic foster care. The refugee children are teenagers. They're typically boys. Their parents are typically deceased or missing, so they don't continue to have those regular family visits that Samina mentioned. They stay with you until they age out of the system, which is between the ages of 18 to 21. Another huge difference is the domestic children are taken from one home to another home, and that's slightly traumatic, right? It's completely something new to them. Imagine being a child being brought from one country to another country. So the culture is completely new. The language is completely new. Technology is completely new. Many of them have missed several years of formal schooling, and now they come here to the US, they're trying to learn, but imagine how difficult and how overwhelming that must be. And if we can give them the one comfort of them being with a Muslim family that at least understands their beliefs and might understand some more of their traditions, then that would be wonderful. I've heard some people say, well, they're teenagers, so they're low maintenance. You don't need to, that's easier. It's not. They need our attention. The young ones need our attention. The older ones need our attention. It's not just a matter of having some space in your home. They need help adjusting. They need help learning the new culture. They need help with the language. That's the biggest obstacle a lot of the time. We need to teach them life skills because they're here as teenagers and soon they're going to be independent. So we need to make sure that they're ready to be independent and work with them on that. When Amanda, the licensing worker that we worked with at Lutheran, first told me about our current foster daughter, I said, but she's a teenager. I've never had a teenager before. My oldest child is 11. I don't know how to parent a teenager. But she really knew what she was doing, and she really knew, Lutheran knows what they're doing. I'm gonna keep giving you guys credit, because you guys really know what you're doing. She knew that she would be a good fit for our family. And she told me, which proved right in my experience, that the refugee foster children tend to be very mature. They tend to be very responsible. They tend to be very appreciative, and they're highly motivated. They are highly motivated. They've got a lot of new things to take on, and they're ready to take it on. When my foster daughter first entered school here, she was the teachers that came to her and, told her, we're willing to help you with whatever you need, and, we're willing to do this with you, whatever you need. And she came home and told me, I'm ready to learn. She said, I'm gonna go to college. She didn't think that college could be an option for her, but just with that support, she's ready to make a great future for herself. The community, you guys, I know a lot of you personally, you guys have been tremendously supportive. And I just want to say thank you. I can't tell you how helpful that is and how much it means to our family. Many of you have even offered to step up as our alternate caregivers, which means that you would even welcome our foster daughter into your home if we needed, if there was such an emergency. So thank you for that. Although I understand that not everybody feels that they can make the commitment to be a foster parent, but even if you don't make that commitment, please know that just your support is important. It's very important. When we first were going through the licensing process, I kept on thinking, I want to talk to other Muslim families. Who else has gone through this? I had so many questions. What is the experience like? There weren't any Muslim refugee foster families for me to speak to, but Fazia and Samina became my go-to people. And I have had a few instances where I would call them up, and actually I would text, and then they would immediately call me because they knew that I immediately needed somebody to talk to, which was wonderful. And we are here to support each other. But I would like to say also that the children of these foster families need to be supported as well. My husband and I hear a lot of great positive comments and support from the community, but the children don't really get exposed to that. And this is a change for them as well, and it's a change in their home. And I think it's very important for them to know that the community supports them. This experience has been full of blessings, and it's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. There are challenges. It is an adjustment, but it's been a wonderful experience. And I see myself in the future, even once our foster daughter grows older and leaves the system, I do see myself doing this again. And that says a lot. That says a lot. Yes, there are challenges. That's part of the reward, inshallah. That's part of the reward.
Thank you, Rania. It takes a lot for everybody to come up here and speak about their experiences because they're so personal, and you can tell everybody's speaking from the heart. So I just am so grateful that they have come to speak from the heart and share everything that they have to say. Our last speaker is Katie Dewar. She is representing us from Lutheran Family Services. She received her master's degree in social work from the University of Michigan with a specialization in global social work. She's been working with Lutheran Social Services of Michigan in a number of capacities since 2013. She's currently the refugee recruitment specialist and intake coordinator, where she provides information to potential foster parents and community members just like all of you. And she's going to share with us information about fostering and Lutheran Family Services, because remember, it's Lutheran Social Services of Michigan that's the only agency that fosters for refugee families. Now, domestic can be done with other agencies, but it's only Lutheran Social Services of Michigan that does licensing for domestic and refugees. Katie.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming out tonight. It's great to see so many people interested in wanting to learn more about our programs and foster care in general. So yes, I work for Lutheran Social Services of Michigan. A little bit about our agency. We provide a wide spectrum of services across the state of Michigan. We serve anywhere from children to seniors. We provide foster care services, adoption services. We work with adults with disabilities. The list goes on and on. So we are in most communities. We're in every major city across the Lower Peninsula. We are actually the largest private foster care organization in the state of Michigan, and so we do have foster care services in all the major cities as well. But we are only one of 2 organizations that does refugee foster care in Michigan. So there is a lot of people I know recently have heard of Bethany Christian Services, and they are located in Grand Rapids, their refugee foster care program, and so they kind of service the west side of the state. And then my office, our refugee office, is based in Lansing, and so we license homes on the east side of the state. So if that is something you're interested in, we would be the agency that you would work with to become a licensed foster parent for refugee. So our program started back in the 70s with Vietnamese and Indochinese refugees coming over. We've seen that population change over time because, as you can imagine, where crisis is happening in the world is going to affect the youth that we see coming into our programs. I can tell you right now, I do the intakes. So every youth that needs a placement, it comes across my desk and I read through their file. And in the last 6 months, half of the new referrals were for Muslim youth coming into care. So half of the youth that we saw were Muslim, and until recently, we had 0 Muslim homes. So all of those youth, all of those youth that were coming into our care, we had no option for them other than to place them in a non-Muslim home. And like our speakers have said, that can be great. It can be a great experience, but we understand that these youth need more, that they can get more support and more comfort, and they'll feel more welcomed if they could come into a home that understands their culture and their religion. Particularly with our refugee youth, I always just think about how much they've lost already. They have had to flee their home for fear of persecution. They can't go home, they're stateless, they have nowhere to go, they've been shuffled into these refugee camps, they've been living for years. Our youth are unaccompanied refugee minors, so they've lost a parent or an adult to come resettle with them. So they've been trying to make it on their own in these refugee camps, and they've lost their connections to all of those things, and so to bring them here and not have a Muslim home to put them in, we don't want them to feel like they're losing their religion as well. So we are definitely thankful for all of you who came out and are definitely interested in finding out more. So I know Syria is in the news a lot, and I will talk a little bit about that in a bit, but I kind of wanted to touch on the youth that are in our programs now. So the countries where we are seeing a lot of youth come from are Eritrea, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, Afghanistan, and Sudan are the highest numbers of Muslim youth. And then we also see a number of youth coming from Central America, so Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador. And those are our big groups right now that we're seeing. And like I said, we see shifts in that all the time, depending on where conflict is happening in the world. I can also tell you that in the last quarter of all the youth that were referred to our agency for refugee foster care, so all those reports that passed through my desk, we were only able to take 1/4 of them and place them in a home. And it's not because we don't have the staff or the time, it's because we don't have the homes. And in this program, the youth that we don't have homes for aren't able to come. They may have been cleared to come to the US by the UN. They said, you're safe, you're good, we got you, let's bring you to the United States. But if services like us don't have the foster homes, they can't come. We have nowhere to put them. And so the youth that we have to say no to are just banking on another agency having a home and saying yes, and until they do, they're waiting in a refugee camp. And that's really hard, and it's hard to think about, especially because the youth that come into our care we touched on are usually 16 and 17, they're older teenagers. We try so hard to get them in a home before their 18th birthday because then we can provide them services till they're 21. If we don't get them in a home before their 18th birthday, they come as an adult and they get 90 days of services. So that dramatically decreases, and it just becomes such a harder task to resettle as an adult than if they could have the support of an agency like ours in a foster home to really get those independent living skills and help them go to school and all of those things before they turn 18. So that's why it's very, very important to us. Sorry. So I guess I'll talk a little bit about Syrian refugees because I know that it's in the news and lots of people have lots of questions. We have not had any referrals for unaccompanied refugee minors, so URMs, what we call them, Syrian youth, yet. The processing to come to the United States and be resettled is very long. So whether you're a family or a minor on your own, you go through a number of interviews, you are screened, you have to go through background checks, fingerprinting, medical screenings. It is a long, long, long process. And then on top of that, there are currently 20 million refugees worldwide who are waiting to go through that resettlement process, 4 million Syrians, and so the humanitarian workers are overwhelmed. You know, it's a lot to process. So it takes years sometimes for all that processing to come through before we see youth. So we haven't had those referrals come through yet, but we do anticipate that later in 2016 is when we're going to start seeing them. So people who are interested, what we're asking, if you really, really, really want to foster that Syrian youth, now's a good time to get started in licensing, or at least start thinking about the licensing process, because it does take 3 to 6 months. We try to do it in 90 to 100 days. It can take longer to get through the process, because like I said, if the homes aren't there licensed, we can't bring the youth. So the licensing needs to happen first. So if you are interested in thinking about it, getting licensed is a good place to start, and then it might be a little wait before we have Syrian youth, but in the meantime, like I said, there are all of those youth from all those other countries that are still in need of homes. And so there are still ways that you can open up your home to other youth, and then later down the road, when the Syrians are ready to come over and be resettled, then we'll have the homes available to them. I have a number of flyers in the back. I just want to run over kind of what they were if you were interested. So we have a frequently asked questions page, which kind of goes over a lot of what I just talked about. And then a flyer that says what to expect, and that talks about the licensing process. So the licensing process is actually very similar whether you're looking at hosting a refugee or a domestic youth in your home. So it starts with an orientation, and that orientation is the same for both programs. So wonderfully, Rania has helped us to set up an orientation actually that's happening here on the 7th, November 7th. So Amanda, who is our wonderful licensing worker, is going to be here. And so if you're interested on either program, just coming to finding out more about the licensing process, what that looks like, some of the state regulations that we have to meet, that is when you can come and really get all that information and kind of get started if you're just jumping at the bit and ready to go. So it starts with an orientation. You'll get an application. Once that application is filled out and signed, that's when things really get started. And then we will be collecting a lot of documents from you to verify income, a marriage license, driver's license, all of those things. We're going to ask that you go to a doctor and get a TB test, just because the youth in our refugee programs are pretty susceptible to some of those things, so we just want to know that the house is medically clear. We're going to interview some references, we're going to run background checks. It's a long process, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but you guys have some really great resources here to help you along the way and help guide and support you. So I know that was a lot of information really quickly. Oh, one more thing. So another flyer back there is it's about mentoring and tutoring. So we have a program. If you're not ready to take a youth into your home, you don't feel like it's the right time for you, one way to get involved is to become a mentor or a tutor. So our mentors meet with youth about 4 hours a month, just to be another set of eyes and ears to really listen to the youth and help support them. It would be a great way for you guys to get involved with youth who are not currently in Muslim homes. We would love to match those youth with a Muslim person to help support them. And also the tutoring is for anyone who's over 18 and has a bachelor's degree to help support them with school and English language skills, and just again be another adult and support in their community. So I know that's a lot, but my stuff's the kind of drier information, but I really want to say thank you for coming out, and also thank both of you for your work as foster parents. You really are the heart and soul of what we do at Lutheran. I know that workers, we might complain about the long hours, but we go home and the day is done, and we really do appreciate and understand that your job goes on, and we thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you, Katie. going to end with a testimonial that Mona is going to share with us from a child who was in the foster care system. And I'm gonna let her read that, and then we will have question and answer after that.
Assalamualaikum. This is a message that was sent to me by a child who has aged out of the foster care system. She's now 21 years old, and she is in college. She's over at Western Michigan University. She had wanted to be here today, but I didn't give her enough notice. Otherwise, she would have been here. She sent this message. She said, "Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Aman. I was born and raised in Egypt. I came to the USA at age 14. I am a junior at Western Michigan University, majoring in social work. Growing up, I was blessed with a wonderful, loving, and caring family that anyone could dream of. Alhamdulillah, I never thought once in my life that I would be part of the foster care system. But because of unforeseen circumstances, I was placed in the child welfare system at the age of 15. At that point, I was taken away from everything and everyone I knew and loved. I was first placed in a shelter and then a group home where I lived for about 2 years. During that time, my worker, my lawyer, and the agency that I stayed with tried their best to find a Muslim foster family, but sadly, there were none. I lost hope in finding a Muslim family after waiting for 1.5 years. And at that point, I did not really care what religion they were. Later, my lawyer found a good family who were Christian. We met and we both liked each other. They were very nice. My worker started doing the paperwork so I could move in with them as soon as possible. A week before moving, I got a phone call that I would no longer move with that family, with no explanation why. 2 months later, I got a phone call from my lawyer saying that she found a Muslim family. I was so happy because Ramadan and Eid were coming soon, and this year I would not spend it alone. My foster family were originally from Pakistan. We had a different culture. And the list can go on and on, but none of those factors made them change their mind. In all honesty, if I did not find them, I would have lost my deen, and I would not be where I am today. I will be forever thankful, grateful, and indebted for what they did for me." And then later on, she sent another text message and said, "I pray that tonight, inshallah, you guys will have a good turnout and more children who are in need will find homes." And I remember when she came into foster care and I was made aware of her case, and her lawyer came to me and she told me, I was a referee then, and her lawyer came to me, we worked in the same court, and she told me, "I have this Muslim teenager. She is a very religious child and she desperately wants to be in a Muslim foster home. Do you know of any Muslim families that will take her?" I didn't know of any licensed Muslim families. And then it got to the point where she turned 16, and at age 16, we can do a special program, SIL, where you don't actually have to have the foster care license. In any case, I opened up my contacts, and I went through and I scrolled down and I called probably close to 50 people. And I was asking everyone, "Listen, there's this 16-year-old Muslim foster child. We're trying to find her a home. Are you willing? Do you know anyone who will take her?" No one would take her. And I didn't know her personally, but all I heard from her lawyer and from her workers that she's a really good kid. But everyone was scared about a teenager. And then this one friend of mine, who was like an angel, she was going through her own difficulties at the time. And it just casually, we were out together and we're having a cup of coffee, and I told her, "Look, we're trying to find this home for this 16-year-old, and I didn't even think that she would consider it." And she just said, "I'll take her." And that was it. And alhamdulillah, she's been such a blessing for that family, for our community, for my children. My children look up to her. She's an amazing role model. I'm not saying that it was easy to take her in as a foster child, but it had its blessings come with it. So that's her message to us tonight.
SubhanAllah, I'm so glad that you shared that story because that really puts a voice to everything that we're trying to do here tonight. And, I think that there's, I hope that at the end of this evening, there are many, many people that feel that they are ready to become licensed. Even if you don't think that tomorrow you can take this on, become licensed. Become licensed because if not in 6 months, something may change in a year. And you may be ready in a year, but if you haven't gone through the licensing process, then you're already 3 to 6 months behind. So please, please consider it. Talk to your family support. If you're married, talk to your spouse. Seriously, consider just getting through the licensing process. Alhamdulillah, I think we want to do everything we can to help, but I think sometimes we underestimate what these children can teach us, what they can show us. SubhanAllah, Allah brings these things and these circumstances for a reason, and there's a lot that we can learn from these children when they're in our home. I would like to start off the question and answer with a question of my own, because Rania and Samina, you guys both talked about how there were few people like yourselves and the support. Alhamdulillah, I know, Rania, you said the community was very supportive to you. How can the community support you more, and how can the community support the kids? Because you said the kids weren't seeing that. These kids need our support just as much as the families and the parents that are taking them in.
That's a great question, Fonzie. Actually, every single person in this room can do something. One, whoever thinks that they can, become licensed. If you can't take on a child full-time, you can at least provide respite care. One of the saving graces for us was we had one of the family in Ann Arbor who became licensed 3 months after we did. And when we had a difficulty in our family and we couldn't keep Rashid, they stepped up and they took him for a week. It was just a week. We needed to, it was a family situation. But if we didn't have that family, we would have to put him in a non-Muslim family home. So there are families that can become full-time foster care workers, but families, but you can also just provide respite care where people go on vacation. If you go out of the country, you can't take your foster children with you. If you go out of the state, unless the parents give permission, you can't take the foster children with you. So sometimes we need families to place these children in even for short periods of time. And sometimes families just need a break. It is hard work. Depending on the child, every child is different. Some children have special needs. Some children just, the trauma that they go through, it's difficult. Mommy support group. Everyone who has a baby knows when a new child comes into your home, it is mayhem. And just as a new mom needs family support, friend support, when I took Rashid in, I had friends that cooked for me. I had friends that said, hey, I'll pick him up and take him for a play date. I had friends that said, hey, I can take him to a visit. I had friends who said, hey, I can take him to the museum. You need people around you supporting you. I mean, initially when we started, I had some family members that were sort of, why did you do this? You have children of your own. I had one person who said, well, at least he's not black. I mean, I think people are just ignorant. But when they met Rashid, I cannot tell you how many people, when you see that child, when you put a face to these statistics, your heart will melt. There's no way that you cannot do something. Mona last year, she arranged a care package for Eid, where she, whatever names that she could get from the Wayne County that sounded like Muslim names, she made, she fundraised, she collected books, she collected toys. What's MMCC? Sorry, MMCC. But you did do most of the work. I take credit. But So those children, and even Rashid received one, you should have seen the look on his face when he opened up the box and he saw a card made from another Muslim child that said, "Happy Eid from your Muslim brother or sister." I mean, it was these small things you cannot underestimate how much support it can give to the child. And even for my children to see, which when Rania talks about, what we can do for the children, when you have activities where you involve your children, where your children, speak to other children. I mean, Rashid we sent him to our Islamic school, and I cannot tell you how many of the teachers took it upon themselves to give him the extra, lessons and work. My mom, who's an ESL teacher, she would sit with him, and from those 12 letters, he learned to read in 3 months. And from those 12 English letters, she taught him, he wanted to learn the Quran because my niece was learning, and he wanted to learn the Quran, and we thought, it's going to be too much for him. He not only learned the Arabic letters, he finished the Qaida, he finished in June, he finished reading the whole Quran with Tajweed, and he's in the second time around. So these children have the capacity to come from very challenging situations, and have such deficiencies, but if they're given the right environment. And so that's why the community is so important, because one family can't do it. We're just struggling. We're just managing day to day. I can just tell you that. But extra community, extra family, extra people coming in and taking on these extra roles, they have such an impact on these children. As I said, when Rashid came, he only had the clothes on his back. You do get a stipend from the agency, but sometimes it takes a while for the stipend to come in. Some families may feel that the money is an issue when children come in, and we should have clothes available. I had community members that knew what age he was and came and dropped off new clothes, school supplies. We have to support these families so that they don't feel that they have to run out and do everything for that child. We have an agency, a Muslim Family Services Agency. It's the only social services agency in our community. They are trying to help bridge the gap with these children. They are trying to try to match up foster children agencies, trying to educate the agencies that are existing about Muslim children. And we need to support these agencies. And we need to also encourage our children to go into social sciences. Rashid, I took him to a therapist every 2 weeks. She wasn't Muslim. She was an amazing therapist. I'm not gonna lie. But we need culturally sensitive social workers, therapists, psychiatrists to help these children transition from the trauma that they have gone through when they are placed outside, in a home. And regardless of how loving the home is, it is a trauma when you're taken from your family and put in a totally different family. And your own children, I had to have my own children actually have to go through some counseling because it's a trauma for them too to have this child come in, very different behaviors. But alhamdulillah, when I was going through it, I would call Mona. Mona was my speed dial person. And she would just talk me through. And I did want to have other Muslim foster families to talk to, but I didn't. And I think that as more families, come into the fold, it will become easier. It can't not.
Thank you, Samina. I think the other point that you touched on was how it affected your own children as well. And I think it's so important for the community to support the kids in this family, not just the foster kids, but the kids that are now that have somebody new in their family. They need, the family routine needs to continue. They need to know that life isn't changing so much when a foster child comes in, and that they need to also be applauded for what they are doing, because they're just, these are, Rania has kids that are 11 and 10 and 6, and those kids need to know that what they are doing and what they are part of is so important. So with that, questions?
Can you elaborate on the event on the 7th so they know what time? Is there anything they need to bring with them?
Yeah, so Katie mentioned, we just finalized the flyer, so you'll see it now. It'll be publicized more. If you know that you would like to start the licensing process, domestic and refugee, Lutheran can license you for both. Mark your calendars, November 7th at 11 a.m. right here at Unity Center. Amanda, who's the licensing worker for Lutheran, is gonna come. We ask that you register so we know how many people to expect. If you're married, you have to bring your spouse. It takes about 2 hours. If you're a single parent, you are more than welcome to come as well. If you even know people that are outside of our Muslim community but want to become licensed, please, just welcome anyone that's interested here. It takes about 2 hours. You don't need to bring anything with you. This is just an orientation, the first step in the licensing process. After this, like what Katie said, it's a lot of paperwork, a lot of submitting paperwork, running off copies, and then it takes 3 to 6 months. But please mark your calendars, November 7th. The registration link is on the flyer. I know a lot of the masajid are going to be sending out that flyer, and if you don't register, please still come. We just want to get an idea of how many people to expect that day. It's about 2 hours.
The people who cannot come Saturday, can they contact directly to Lutheran Services?
Yeah, and what I was gonna do is I was gonna talk with Amanda, and Lutheran has like a list of locations and dates when they offer orientation, so I'm sure you could go to their website or call them and they'll be able to give you that information, and I'm trying to consolidate that information as well too. But yes, that's definitely an option. We're just trying to make it convenient for the people, that can come here that day.
She asked if somebody was already licensed with another organization and said they wanted to work with us in our refugee program. Is that something we can accept? So that you'd have to transfer your license to our organization. So that's a conversation that you would need to start with the organization that you're currently licensed with. But then from there, we're able to transfer pretty quickly. We just need to do a quick orientation with you, and there's a little additional training for our refugee youth, but you wouldn't need to start the process over. So if that is something you're thinking about, I would definitely talk to the agency you're licensed with currently and let them know that you're thinking about transferring to work with refugee youth, and they can help guide you on next steps.
Reem, you've had your hand up.
Who determines the time that they stay with you? Like, for example, Rashid stayed with you, you said for 2.5 years. Is that a very difficult adjustment? You've gotten used to this child, you've really helped, help this child blossom. What happens afterwards? Do you still maintain a connection? Who decides that the child leaves your home?
So, in a foster care system, in domestic foster care system, the emphasis is on reunification with your family. So that's the whole is the push is to try to get services to the parents, get them on track, and then get the child back. Get the services they need, get the education they need, get the child back. In a situation, it dragged on, and every county is different as to how long they allow the process. And because Rashid's father was from Iraq and was a refugee himself, they really dragged on as long as they could, so that they, because they knew it was going to be a difficult loss for him. And then when the rights of the parents were terminated, then you do as a family have an opportunity to take that child in permanently, and then also that child can also be put up for adoption. And in our case, I had some friends that didn't have children of their own that, alhamdulillah, really took to Rashid. And he's still he comes over, she just finally actually the adoption got finalized, the paperwork got finalized just about a week ago. And the transition was over the summer where he would stay with us on the weekend. He would stay with them on the weekend and stay with us during the week, and then the time with them got prolonged. And because we were friends with them prior to him transferring over there, being adopted, I think the transition, alhamdulillah, as Mona said, it was the best outcome we could have expected. But in a lot of situations, there's two reasons that a child will be taken out of your home. One, if you decide to take him, that you can't take him anymore, that you can't, no longer he can stay with you, or the agencies, he goes back to his family, or he goes to a different adoptive family.
I just want to answer in regards to refugee foster care. They come as teenagers. They can't be adopted. They stay within the system until they age out. And just like somebody said, if you travel internationally, they can't travel with you internationally. If we travel outside of Michigan, we need to get permission before we do that ahead of time. So if you have an unexpected trip somewhere, you've got to kind of, try and work things out, and that's where the alternate caregiver really comes in handy. But the refugee foster kids stay in the system until they age out, and they can age out of the system between the ages of 18 and 21.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I just would say that the intention when the youth come into care in refugee foster care is long-term placement. So the idea is that the home that they're being placed in is going to be their home until they age out, and that's one way that the system is a little different than domestic.
Just one thing to add. On the domestic side, about 50% of the children who come into foster care are reunified with their parents and go back home, and about 50% stay long-term or permanently to be adopted.
Yes, so just for System 1, in regards to the Wayne County foster care system, my wife and I, in 2010, applied for foster care. We went through the whole process. We got approved. We were basically based out of the Redford office of Elisa, and we requested specifically to have any children that are from a Muslim background. At the time, I don't know if that's the case back then or not, but we told there was none in the system. That was in 2010. Is there a way for us as parents or people who are interested to go online and look at, well, at least some more information that we can be able to access and see if there's availability in the area or not? That's my question number 1. Number 2, I'm not sure if the license is still valid or not for us to be able, but if it's valid, can we still use that?
So his question was, he said he got licensed in 2010 in Wayne County. I'm not sure through what agency. Was it DHS?
Yes.
Right, through Department of Health and Human Services.
Yes.
And he was told at that time there were no Muslim children in foster care. I know that there were Muslim children in foster care because I was working at that time with, in the system, and so there were. It may have been that they didn't want to pull them out of a stable home and move them to another home. But they're constantly, there's a revolving door of children coming in and children coming out. Once you're licensed, it has to be renewed every year.
Just a home visit, just a simple home visit.
Yeah, so
It's just a simple home visit, they renew it. If it's expired, I think you do have to, I think some of the things can be carried over, but it's physicals and certain medical things you have to redo, so.
The reason I'm asking is because we, for about almost 6 months, the first 6 months after we finally got certified for it, we kept asking for any, and we got frustrated to a certain extent that there is no, we were not only just looking for it, but we had specifications for the age of the child and so forth.
you did have specifications.
Yes, but it's just because I have a daughter as well.
I understand.
And I'm not sure if that was the case with everybody, but it wasn't.
You do have to be patient, because one thing I didn't mention is that there's an order of preference of homes to place the children in. If we have a relative who is willing to take that child, we're gonna put that child with a relative before we put them in a foster home. So of those 70-some children that I know are Muslim in Wayne County foster care, many of them, or some of them at least, are with relatives. And then the agency, like I said, is if a child is in a stable home and doing well, they're not likely to move that child to a Muslim home just because a Muslim home all of a sudden opened up, unless there's some other reason the foster parent wants them removed or there's some problem. But there are constantly children coming in, so I would encourage you to keep that license, get it renewed. Right now, DHS contracts, I think all of their foster care through private agencies. So DHS no longer does direct foster care like they were doing in 2010. So you have to go through an agency. What I recommend people do is contact Muslim Family Services. There is a person there, Shafati, her name, who keeps a database of Maymuna. Maymuna keeps a database of Muslim foster homes, so that when an agency comes and tells us, listen, we've got these, 4 children coming into care, do you have Muslim homes? we can at least, call Maimuna and say, Maimuna, who do you have? Who do you know of that is licensed? Because there's all these different agencies now that do it, that it's nice for us to know centrally who's licensed.
For the last 4 years, we have been training people, to get the license, alhamdulillah. And we have 10 licensed foster parents in our database right now. And we are recruiting, constantly recruit people with, Vista Maria and other agencies, those are all our contacts. So, this we offer throughout Southeast and Southwest of Michigan. So, Muslim Family Services is well known, and Sheikh Ali is the director of that organization. It's well known organization since 1998.
I think there's a question on the sister session. Oh.
I'm gonna read the question and then I'm gonna let Katie answer it. The question says, how about if we collect or gather some of the foster children and put them in a home under the supervision of a director? So it kind of sounds like it's going back to the whole orphanage idea, so I'm gonna let Katie answer.
So I can sort of speak to the refugee foster care perspective, and kind of one answer is that we are contracted through the federal government. So the Office of Refugee Resettlement really oversees our programming, and so they have some pretty strict guidelines. And so to even have a refugee program, you need to contract out with the federal government and get a contract from them. And part of that contract says that you will place youth in the least restrictive setting possible. And so that is first and foremost a foster home. And so really, if you were seeking to get a sort of contract with the government, they would want to see that you're really focusing on foster homes and trying to do a home setting before that you would do any sort of group home sort of setting with the youth. And a reason for that is that, as we know from human development and all of that great coursework, youth do better in a home setting. They do better with one-on-one attention. They do better in that sort of environment versus in an environment that doesn't give them that same sort of structure and care and love. And not that couldn't be possible in a setting like that, but we just know that really the success rate of independent, happy children comes from coming out of foster homes.
I have a follow-up question.
There's a sister who's been waiting on this side. If you don't mind, I'm just going to take her question.
Yes, my question is very close to what you just mentioned about having a building. I mean, it can be managed that we get one-on-one attention as it's supposed to be. And I believe it will be more stable for all members of the commission. It will be more stable to have a building and it can be supervised and get that one-on-one attention.
I get this question all the time from a lot of people in the Muslim community. How about we donate money and we'll start a home and we'll have these adults that run the home and the children get lots of attention, and it's not gonna happen. I mean, it's not gonna happen anytime soon. There are, like I said, there are group homes, there are some residential facilities that provide, say a child needs residential mental health services or extreme behavioral services. Sometimes we put kids in a group home or in a residential placement for that specific purpose. We will never put a young child, and this is the law, and the policy of the state and the United States is that we won't put a young child in any kind of institution, including that kind of building that we give money to. It doesn't, that's, and I wouldn't want it for my own child.
It's not better. It's not a better
Yes.
situation.
So, but I do have a dream that one day, perhaps Muslim Family Services or some other agency like Lutheran Social Services or Catholic Social Services or Vista Maria or any of those agencies, they provide foster care on so many levels. Everything from foster homes, the residential placements, therapeutic services, and we are so behind, but inshallah we can catch up. But we need people to go into the social services, we need social workers, we need foster care workers, we need therapists, and maybe we can build up to the level where we're providing for our community services all around, just like some of the other agencies.
I just wanted to add that as a physician, I am taking care of some foster kids, and I had one child tell me But when he was in a shelter for a month with his parents, with his mom, single mom, because of domestic violence, he said it was like a prison. Because any building, facility, in order to be efficient, functional, you have to have dinner at a certain time, breakfast at a certain time, it has to be the same meals. He said he would do anything. He would rather live homeless than live in a facility. And so we have to stop thinking that we can just put these people in one area and then not see them. We have to bring them into our homes. And I will tell you, for Rashid, the most that he blossomed was when he went to the masajid. It was the first time he had seen a mosque. So bad was his situation at home, he'd never even been to a mosque. But to go to the mosque, to meet the imam, Sheikh Ali, to have people come up and say salam to him, to see uncles, to see aunties, to have presents in Eid, this is what children need. They don't need just food, clothing, safety. They need a community. Islam is a faith of community. It's not just a faith we live at home.
Thank you.
I have a question. How to become a mentor or a tutor, I guess? How to make logistics? I'm assuming there is no license required. Okay, but how do you get to a list? So people, even if they need such help,
Yes.
approach you.
Absolutely. So we have a whole program. So there is a flyer on the back, I think it's green, that talks about our mentoring and tutoring program, and there is a contact on there named Ann Osgood, and she is our coordinator. So you can contact her. It's not becoming fully licensed. We do a background check. We will do a training with you, a couple other things just to, again, ensure that all the youth are safe. And then from there, you'll be on our list as a mentor or a tutor. And so when we have a youth that is in need of those services, Ann will give you a call and let you know. So, yep, back on the green sheet, Ann Osgood, she's the contact to follow up with that.
Can't those refugee children get some sort of refugee travel document that will enable them to travel with me if I want to go abroad?
No, so to travel abroad, they wouldn't be able to do that with you while they're in our care receiving our services.
Well, I mean, aren't they considered refugees?
Yes, so they have a status, but just because they are still considered foster youth as well as refugees, from the foster care end, we need to sort of be able to keep an eye on what they are doing, what they're up to.
They remain under Lutheran's jurisdiction, but please don't let that stop you. I mean, anybody out here that gets licensed, if you need to travel, your foster child is welcome to stay in our home.
The thing is, if I want to treat them like my children, I
Yeah.
want to go, like, for example, to Canada, Mecca, or something. I want to, treat them all alike without any
Yeah.
kind of segregation. So I don't want to leave them with my parents, for example.
I
and go-
understand, they understand that. The refugee foster kids, they know that, and, again, I would take them to my home. So please don't let that stop anyone.
I'll give one example with us. We have 3 kids, girl and a boy. So we consider, and we talk about it all the time, how can I, let's say, accept a teenager when I have, let's say, I have a girl, and from the Islamic standpoint of view, she has to be covered, and, just, let's say, having a girl. So how do we, from the Islamic standpoint of view, how do I balance that? Because honestly, that's the only thing that's really stopping us from considering it. I don't know how to deal with that.
I'm going to let Rania speak to that, and then Imam Masmari will end on that.
I want to hand the microphone over to Imam Masmadi, but I do want to say, going back to what I said about these youth, they are very mature, and they are very well-mannered, and they understand those cultural, oh, there you are. They understand those religious and those cultural norms, and I'll let you speak to that. But again, I'm at a loss for words right now.
If they don't, can you repeat the question, Rania? Or Imam Masmari, can you repeat the question?
I guess he asked the question that many are asking about bringing a teenager into your house or into your home. First of all, before I answer that question, when we are dealing with a complete system, don't try to change the law. It's like when you ask a question, don't change the law through your question, or why not do that? Why not just deal with the system? Be part of the system, get to know the system, and then whatever happens in the future happens. But, you know, please, when you ask our questions, don't say, okay, but I think, people really thought this through. You know, everything is documented, everything is on the paper, and so please, just when we ask the questions, try to, if we can solve the problem or bring more clarification is what's needed, not to change the whole, what they have established for many years. So in terms of bringing a teenager in, there's a few things that we're looking at. Again, fiqh is very broad, and this is not a new topic that just, you know, came up, and subhanAllah, because these are ongoing situations, you know. Regardless of the foster care child, it is also with relatives, it is also with guests, it is all, so there's a whole list of things that always come up, and this is just one case of many. So when we're looking at the situation, what really makes imams and mashayikh, and I've spoken to a few mashayikh in the last few weeks because there's a lot of fatwa that needs to be discussed, and inshallah there's upcoming meetings. And one of them was this, is that we're looking at two things now. Of course, we're saving them as human beings to begin with. We're saving a human soul, which is an obligation for all of us. And secondly, we are preserving their faith. Okay? And for us, this is something very important, something that is very critical, and this is essential. This is part of our faith. So we protect them as human beings, and we also protect and preserve their faith. So we're looking at that. This is where we begin. Of course, bringing a teenager in comes with a lot of challenges. But when you look at imams, or you're looking at a sheikh that is looking at this from a different angle, this is not the only challenge. What the imam is looking at is, I have the obligation to save this individual, this human being, and to save his faith, to preserve his faith. And there's many challenges that come after that. There is nothing equal to that. You know, so sometimes there's two challenges on both sides, but my obligation is to begin to preserve his humanness and to preserve his faith. And then here comes in the challenge with the teenagers, with girls that come in sometimes, and you might have a husband, or you have teenagers coming in and you have daughters, or you have sons, whatever it is. In terms of how to deal with them, this is where the jihad comes in. When you bring a foster care child, there's challenges to it. There's many challenges. It's not like there's going to be many challenges with your kids. If you have teenagers, when you have girls coming in, or a girl coming in, or a boy coming in, and you have daughters, these challenges will all occur. It will never end. You as a Muslim, of course, if they are brought into our house, in our homes, there are certain limitations. Okay, the dress code will change in the house. Again, this is part of the sacrifice. This is only a few years. This is part of the sacrifice. Going into this, you're not, again, our sisters had to struggle. If you really listen to their lectures, they all had to go through a different struggle. That might not be their struggle, but it could be others. But this is part of the jihad. Is that I will no longer be for an example, if the father comes in and he's always walking around with shorts and shirtless and he's excited, now you have a teenager in the house, that's not going to be the case. That's part of that jihad. No, you're really not going to get what you want. But of course, her being part of the house is accepted in Islam. The understanding of, especially if they're young, a lot of them are young, by the way. They come in as 11 years old, 10 years old. If you have a teenager, try to foster a child that's younger until your children grow out of the system. Or your children move on. Because I'm thinking of, alhamdulillah, I'm in the process of doing the same thing. So of course, for me, it is easier to bring, someone, when my children grow out of the system, out of my house, moving into college, I could have, people that are still there. So look at the age, look at what's good for you, what can work out for your household. They have many options. They have different ages. They can accommodate you. They can work with. This is what they've been doing for years. But of course, when they come in, you have to understand that there's a boundary between men, the boys and the girls, even because in the end, they are not your children. Your son, the son, you treat him like a child, but he cannot be named after you, regardless of what it is, to preserve the family, to preserve where this individual came from, to protect him. We can't say, okay, your father. No, this individual has the right to claim his name and where he is coming from, or where she is coming from, to feel honored from where they have come from, or it could be from any country around the world. So again, there are some limitations. It's the same limitation as when people come to your house. It's the same boundaries. This doesn't change the case. But that doesn't mean that we don't welcome them, because we're in here to preserve them and to preserve their faith. So inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, but
Thank
it didn't
you.
make it any easier.
You know, very good. You know, the hadith, by the way, we all know, we always tell people in our lectures, al-jazaa min jinsil amal, that you're rewarded according to your actions. If your actions are minimal, that's your reward. If you study a lot, you're going to pass. If you study a little, you might make it. If you don't study, you're going to fail. So when the Prophet ﷺ says, "Ana wa kafirul yatimi kahataini fil jannah," when me and the provider for the orphans, you know, he's speaking about himself and that provider, that caretaker. You know, this individual would walk next to the Prophet like this in Jannah. You know, that's not something simple. When the Prophet ﷺ said, "I almost seen," by the way, this goes back to the sisters. That's why they're so involved, alhamdulillah. He says, "I almost seen a lady pass me to Jannah." You know, and the Prophet ﷺ, they asked about this lady. He said, "This is a lady that used to, you know, take care of orphans. You know, they would support in this." So of course, there's a lot of difficulty. Everything is clear. It's just you're not understanding it maybe the way everything is clear, but there's limitations. This is part of the sacrifice. You know, if you welcome a teenager to your house that's 15, yes, your wife has to wear the hijab in the house. This is part of the challenge. And if we have what what they just mentioned, Jazakumullah khair, that if they have, what do they call them? The limited ones? The ones for a week?
Respite.
Respite? Okay. If they have, can you say respite? Is it plural?
Respite.
Okay. If they have different families that are licensed, that's okay, that's how I'm gonna put it. They could, you know, alhamdulillah, we could also help them. You know, okay, you can go out that week. You know what, Sister Lania just told the brother, if you have a child, just drop them off, let me take care of him, and you go do your thing. You know, so if we have community members that are able to do that for a week, you know, there's no excuse for not doing it. You just be licensed. You could take care of someone for a week or two to allow these people to breathe and to go out and to go with their families, to travel to Mecca or to travel to any different country, and they feel that they have a community that is going to take care of this child. So there's no excuse for not participating. You could do it for a day. You could do it for a week. You could at least know the system. If not, you're going to, I know families in California that were, alhamdulillah, they've been married for 10 years, and I know their case for 15 years, and they're like, we never had a child, and this is their opportunity, and alhamdulillah, many of them now have, they took in children that they're raising, and alhamdulillah, they're very good kids. Some of them went into college, alhamdulillah. So it shows you that you always have something to do, and there's always an obligation. So this shouldn't be a barrier, because it is a form of jihad.
Can a person under 18 be a mentor or tutor? Like a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old? Especially with refugees and language.
Yeah, so to be an official mentor or tutor, you do need to be 18 because we are going to run those background checks on the youth, and it's just, again, to assure that everyone is safe. So yeah.
But teenagers can be good friends.
Absolutely, yep. So there are informal networks and ways to become mentors. If a parent wanted to take their mentee out and their son or daughter was also invited, that would be absolutely acceptable.
Yeah, legally, these kids, during the period when they're sitting with the family, they're considered to be dependent, right? So basically, I can claim them in my taxes, that I can have them covered in the insurance plan that I have.
Yes, okay, I'll let you answer.
Well, I mean, as when we had our foster son, he was a dependent, and we claimed, there's a code.
Can you guys clarify that? I know everything is covered by government, the medical and everything. So
you do get, the children get Medicaid, state aid insurance. You get a stipend. It's about $500, $600 a month, and that's it. Everything else is on you. So if you want to put them in private school, whatever, you want to put them in Sunday school, clothes, everything, you get a stipend, and then everything else is on you.
There's a sister in the back. The question?
If I get licensed and I take a child for here, and if I travel overseas and I need them for a month travel, and I ask my friend to take her for a month, my friend has to have a license too?
Yes, license your home, so your friend has to be licensed.
And there's a certain time period where the foster child can only be out of their home for so long. I think it's 10 days. I think it's 10 days. After 10 days, they have to be returned to your home. And even if you're unavailable, somebody else would need to come in that they've already done a background check on, would need to come in and stay at the home.
I guess my question might not be of interest. I came from Ohio. I live in Ohio, and I came because I haven't heard about this information that's mentioned. Are you aware of any organizations in Ohio services?
Yeah, so he was asking about if I knew of any services in Ohio. And I've been getting a lot of questions about a lot of different states. And off the top of my head, I don't know of any, but I'm pretty sure that there are. And what I can let you know is that if you look up LIRS, which is Lutheran Immigrant and Refugee Services, their website, that's the agency one step above us. And so they have a list of all of their partners. So if there was anything in Ohio, it would be on their list. There's another group called USCCB. They are the other agency that does, on a national level, the refugee foster care, and so they might have some in Ohio as well.
Is the Syrian refugees will be teenager or they will be
Teenagers. All refugee foster kids are teenagers, between 13 to 17.
For the refugees foster kids, I remember I asked before and that they have to go to public school. Now, if the parents want to put them in private school, is that an option?
Yes, Amina said that her foster son was in a private Islamic school.
And the ESL would be provided through the private school?
Nope, so you would have to look into and research schools in your area, and if there was a private school you particularly wanted them to attend, again, the fee would sort of be on you, and it would kind of be on your end to research if they had an ESL program. Most schools have something, some are just stronger than others. So if it was between a private school that maybe didn't offer ESL and a public school that had a really great ESL program, that's just something that you would have to really think about.
I'm going to tell you, the majority of their course load at school is ESL. So if they're going into a school, and it's got to be a school that's strong with ESL. That's really what they need.
Okay, so the question that he asked is, are the refugee youth always orphans? And the answer is no. So I see a lot of different cases. There are youth who we have verified that both parents have passed and they are, true orphans. There are also youth who their parent may very well still be living in home country. They decided not to flee, and the 16, 17-year-old youth decided that they wanted to flee and they felt the need to. And so they've come into a refugee camp now and they're being processed and they still have a parent back in home country. When they're doing those interviews, the parent is always contacted to ask sort of permission and consent. Are you comfortable with your youth being resettled? Is that something that's going to be appropriate for the family? And so in the report it says most of the time the family says, yes, it's dangerous here and I absolutely want a better life for my child, so I'm giving my consent for them to go into a foster home in another country. And then other times we honestly just don't know. Conflict is scary and it tears families apart, and the UN and humanitarian work does as much as they can to try to locate families and reunite, but sometimes we just really don't know what's happened to the parents, and so that's why none of our youth are really up for adoption, is because we can't take away any parental rights not knowing what's really happening.
So regarding the refugees, if they have no local parents, like their parents are not in America or they're in the States, do they have to go back? Like for Elenia, Fahia, does she have to go back to Somalia after she reaches 18 to 20?
No. So the question was, once a refugee youth reaches 18, do they have to go back to their home country? And absolutely not. So they are here being resettled as if they came over with a family. So as if a family, we have all, I think, are familiar with refugee families who come and resettle in our community. We welcome them in. These youth are going through the same process. It's just that they don't have an adult, so they're coming into a foster care program. But they have refugee status. They get their green card. They're here. They can take the citizenship test when they're ready if they want to. They will go on to college. The goal is for them to become independent, successful adults in the U.S.
question. For respite family, did I understand you running correctly that it can be, they can stay with another family only for 10 days, even if they're licensed?
After 10 days, the foster child has to be returned to their home. So for example, my foster daughter, if I went on a 2-week vacation, and my foster daughter stayed with my mother-in-law, who, I guess she's not in the room anymore, but she is actually my alternate caregiver. So my foster daughter could stay with my mother-in-law in her home for 10 days. But after those 10 days, my mother-in-law would have to come to my home and continue to stay with her, but in my home.
Even if she's licensed?
Yes. She can't stay out of her home for more than 10 days.
Just out of curiosity, what's the logic of the law? Like somebody want to take a trip for a month, what's the logic?
Well, I believe a lot of it is about stability and going to school, and so that they're not constantly, moving. That's getting a little tricky, guys. I mean, if you're asking if she can jump from home to home, do you want to answer that?
I don't really have an answer to this, but I would say this is a great question for Amanda, the wonderful licensing worker, on November 7th at 11 a.m. here at the Unity Center.
If you don't have family, you have me. They can come to my home. We're going to have to ask Amanda that question to see what the limit is.
I have a question for you.
There's a gentleman waiting in the back.
No.
Nope, he asked if you had to own your home. You don't need to own your home, you can rent. We are just going to look that you are financially stable and able to make your bills now before we add an extra body and mouth and feet and everything to clothe into the home. And so you can rent, you can, like we said, you can be married, you can be single, and none of that matters.
There's a sister in the back. Yep.
I need help to drive my kids. If anybody in the community will be able to help me, I have grandchildren that I take care of. And it's really hard to take the babies, dentist appointment, doctor appointment, visitation. So if anybody can step in and up and offer me driving help, I will do it.
Where do you live? Tell them where you live.
5 minutes from here, Middle Belt and London.
In driving, do you have to be licensed to help with
That's
driving?
No, they just have to do background check on driving.
What if there's only one parent?
Single parent?
Yes. Actually, the statement that Mona read was from a child that lived with a single parent. Single parent with 2 kids.
And you don't have to have children. You could be single without children. They'll do a background check on everyone in the house. But it's very flexible about your background. They're just gonna investigate it thoroughly. But as long as you don't have a criminal background or any background of concern, doesn't matter if you're married or you have kids, and even for finances. I mean, our community is blessed financially. I see foster parents whose whole income for their whole family is like $1,000 a month or less for the whole family, and they become foster parents and they take in these kids and they provide for them. So you don't have to have a huge house. Foster parents live in apartments sometimes. There really is very little restriction. And people should contact Sister Ruby and see if you can get that background check to help her out, because we all know how difficult it is shuttling our own children. She said she's got 3 additional children in her home, plus she takes care of her grandchildren. So whatever help that we can give, we have to support each other, otherwise we will burn out.
Yes? Citizen of the USA.
Nope. If you have your permanent residency, then we can license you.
And they have working visa, they came here and they have visa based on job.
immigrant, permanent resident.
So they have to be either a permanent resident or a citizen. Because again, for the stability of the children, a lot of these restrictions, and I will say as a person who's gone through the licensing, please do not be put off by the intrusiveness of the licensing. It is all to assure the safety of the child. The person that came in checked to make sure that we had proper exits, that in the basement we had a egress window, that, they look at our bills to make sure that we're not doing this to get money for, that we have, and it was a very intrusive licensing process, but at the end of the day, if you had a situation where your child was going to go into a home, I think you would want that and more. And they ask you questions about how do you discipline your child, do you have any pedophiles in your family, do you have anybody who's been in, jail? I mean, they're very, very personal questions, and it's all for the safety of the child, so please do not become discouraged about that.
Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to come out tonight. This is going to conclude our program.